Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to Sega Mega Drive Classics, which is, I believe, what this is sold as. Mega Drive slash Masterclass, Master System Classic. I was in the first part of this talking about how few games actually came out for the Master System until the 32X came out, and they improved some things there. But I decided to look up the whole number. As far as what was released in North America for the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System, there was 677 official licensed games. In total, there were 715 around the world. Compare that to the Master System games, only 360 official games were made. And that's worldwide. And even at that, I would say it's still not really a case that there was two good NES games for every one good Master System game. If anything, I would say it's much worse than that as far as your options. All the graphics look weird now, too. Since I alt-tabbed out. Well, let's get out of this. So we looked at this in first entire row, and I favorited every game that actually is relevant and gave a 5-minute just first impression for all the other games that I've covered. And honestly, I could not tell you what this game was, or this game, because they are so simplistic. You can even see in the box art of the Master System games, it's just this very generic art style that was just not well designed at all. I don't know if they were trying to maybe make their boxes not be confused for VHS or beta tapes, but that really doesn't work well for branding. Just black grid. But let's try Golden Axe. Golden Axe is an actual game with some relevancy. So, in the sense that the Golden Axe series is probably still kind of going on these days, although in all fairness, I think the truth of the matter is a lot of the most recent Golden Axe games are simply just designed. Well, I just got an achievement for doing that. And just getting whacked with these guys dodge. So the first Golden Axe is a beat 'em up game that freezes all the background music when it plays the sound effect of a character dying, which probably goes to show that the Master System does not have enough samples or buffer in their audio system, so they have to straight up unload some memory to load in some different memory. I don't believe this is really what the Golden Axe game is for super long, but I could be actually thinking of a completely different game, because I think there is a similar game that is a fantasy themed game. It's not surprising that there are as many fantasy themed games that was using the magic. It's actually a little surprising that there aren't more Dungeons and Dragons Tolkien-esque events, stories, games that were made. But they do all seem to very much be too heavily focused around the trying to be the same thing as Dungeons and Dragons, and that leaves you in a weird position. I can definitely tell you that this is not good. This is not the experience you would expect or want. Just a screen scrolling experience. And this guy steals our potions. And you can't walk fast enough to hit him. So yeah, this is trying to be a fantasy experience. It's trying to do whatever it can. Let's just let this guy hit me 3 times and then see. And these old games are so slow. Like, he hit me and that still didn't take a health off at all. You have to take like 4 or 5 hits before you lose 1 pip of health at the bottom of the screen, which oddly your life bar is at the bottom of the screen. So yeah, I kind of feel like the Master System just tried to rush to compete with the NES, or perhaps even just rush to compete to replace the Atari or the Commodore 64 or any of the first generation consoles out there. Okay, and so you can just continue also. Good to know. So Golden Axe does seem like something you can play, and there definitely is an obvious reason why that would be the case. And since I just moved that up, that means Galaxy Force moved down. Let's see what Golden Axe 2 looks like now. I think I'm confusing Golden Axe with Gauntlet. But yeah, you have a dwarf, you have a sexy barbarian woman, and you have a sexy barbarian man. And in all fairness, maybe amongst dwarves, he's a sexy dwarf. But they're still going with the side-scrolling appearance. It does definitely feel like you can combo 2 or 3 attacks now and actually accomplish things and not just have to get yourself positioned exactly in frame so that you can attack without being hit yourself. They've also fixed the UI in the second game, so it's just all at the bottom of the screen. And now you collect magic books instead of collecting potions. And they're making it definitely feel like you're more of a savior character instead of potentially just a bandit fighting another bandit, just by having the people to save more often. Now you have a different creature you can ride. Honestly, the feature of having a creature to ride actually is enough variety to have a game like this stand out compared to other games that I imagine already existed. Like, honestly, even just one little feature is all it took to make your game have at least a little bit of a selling point. Whereas nowadays, your game has to be fully featured, and you have to have some very generic things that almost always are expected, or your game becomes unique in the fact that it doesn't have those generic things. Regenerating health is about half the time required in a game. For something like this, you may not have regenerating health, but you would definitely have checkpoints and continues. You would definitely have boss battles that are bigger than the boss battle we fought in the first game. You would have multiple weapons. You would have probably some RPG elements where you skilled up. Right. Let's see what this magic attack looks like. And I didn't get an achievement for doing that in Golden Axe 2. Just go ahead and use the magic attack each time, which I imagine is not their intention. To have you just use all the magic on one boss battle. Although, in all fairness, it does seem like it's taking the entirety of everything you could have collected. This might be one of those games where you're supposed to actually lose. And then she's sleeping and you have wizards. So, like, mediocre improvement for a game that probably came out, I would suspect, a year or two at most after the first one. And then Golden Axe 3. I wouldn't be surprised if these were released like 6 months apart, particularly in the United States, because I do suspect that the Master System's release, while it may have been a little rushed, was probably not day and date with the... How do I choose the dwarf? I keep pressing the button and I can only cycle through these 4 things. Let's see, up, left, down, right. Interesting, it's not letting me choose the dwarf guy. So somebody new will play the panther guy, I guess. Interesting, they have the health bar and now the health bar and everything now on the top left. And you really can't criticize any of these games for being for being 4:3 ratio. That was the only standard, really. Although I think there is something to be said that a lot of games for the Master System, I believe, were designed more to run at 59 Hertz for the European electrical outlet system versus the 60 Hertz that you would probably get out of a United States electrical outlet. They're back to small guys dropping vials, and you're having to pick up the vials now instead of just walking over them. It really feels like a completely different team made Golden Axe 2 compared to Golden Axe 1 and 3. A lot more shirtless guys in this one too. Yeah, I think Golden Axe 2 is way better designed. It looks visually better. Its interface is I think a little bit more viable to see. It feels like it ran maybe as good, if not better, than Golden Axe 3. What's a funny thing you could make an argument here is that this is definitely early days of video games, and the fact that there are actually a almost, or at least closer to 50% breakdown of male and female enemies, where for decades later, even to this date, there is a high desire and focus to have only male enemies, and either completely ignore that females exist and that they can be bad guys, and that there can be scenarios where it is equally as wrong to attack a woman as it is to attack a man, or equally as right. In this scenario, I assume we're on some just cause, and these are bad people attacking me. But yeah, for decades since, if you do see a female in a game, it often is just a love interest. It is also interesting that the second game had a character that was willing to show her belly button, and then the third game is covering up the belly buttons of the female characters. Now that ratio is kind of like a great ratio to compare, because there was 4 male characters and 2 female characters. Let's see what the magic does. It does just a sandstorm. That's a pretty pathetic attack. It looks like it does a lot of damage, but it does not look powerful. And yeah. Yeah, I think Gauntlet is the game I'm thinking of, but I think in the arcade version, the Gauntlet I'm thinking of, you had to constantly put in quarters because you were constantly running out of health, and it was just like the greediest game you could ever possibly think of. And it was like a 4-player arcade setup usually, so there's 4 players potentially playing, and it was much more of a top-down roguelike experience. But there definitely were arcade games out there that were designed specifically to give you cheap hits and do damage and stun lock you, so that often they tried to be very deceptive about it too, but they intentionally made them so you could not beat the game in 1 quarter or anything close to that. And the game that I'm thinking of, which I think is Gauntlet, was so notoriously greedy about it and obvious about it that that it became an issue, certainly, with people actually complaining about how greedy it was. And then I think it's also worth mentioning that there might be a reason to not have goblins in your story. Like, a lot of folklore stories of goblins turned out to potentially be code word for just Africans. So, yeah. But I guess that could be true for just about anything. Frankly, almost any monster mythos probably was code worded for some form of racism at some point. No, that probably doesn't really matter to most people, because I don't think most people would even know that. And I don't know if I'd call those little guys carrying bags goblins anyways. I don't know what I would really call them. But they definitely are iconic, because the idea of like leprechauns, I guess, would be the closest equivalent. Somebody with a bag of gold running around or running around stealing things is a concept that has been done for a while. This looks very cartoony, and this feels like a cartoon that I may have seen at some time. This is Gunstar Heroes. Feels like there must have been a remake of this at some point. So this is a run and gunner Contra game. You definitely also saw kind of the same kind of games over and over again. And who knows why that really is the case. Probably code sharing, probably the same companies and the same people working on the same kind of games, seeing what sold in arcades. It's easy to forget that there was probably a good decade of arcade games that existed before these generation of consoles came out, so they probably knew what could be made, what worked, what sold, what didn't. And this is high action for a Master System, to the point you can see that some of these explosion effects are not even animating right. They're glitching, and they probably glitched in the first time. But heck, they've got this working, and he's able to. He's like totally able to. He's totally able to do multiple attacks. And here I'm attacking a giant asparagus. This isn't Cuphead by any means, but it's very similar to it. But even in this case, compared to Cuphead, you have like 100 vitality. But then you also have a number above the asparagus, which is either his health. Yep, I just defeated him. Or it was a timer. I thought it might be a timer. Well, after that boss, it does kind of show that there's some repetitiveness here, and you will want to kind of run into this experience as quickly as possible. Because, yeah, this is going to get very boring very fast. A lot of games telling you to keep playing, keep going forward. That's straight from the mentality of an arcade game, where they want somebody playing the arcade at all times. You can't just stay in one place and not take damage. And look, we've even got some 3D effects, or 3D-like effects, which for the Master System is actually incredibly surprising. With a continue system. Alright, well, I'll say Gunstar Heroes. Even though I don't know exactly where it's from, that is a game that does seem like it is quality enough that I would potentially, if I was just super bored, get into maybe trying to play. But honestly, in reality, that would almost certainly never happen. Like, I have way too many other games to play that I'd ever come back and play Gunstar Heroes. But if there was a remaster or a remake of it, it would have to be a remake, not just a remaster. These games are far too old to justify this. I feel like Kid Chameleon. also may have gone on to spawn some sequels. I'm hitting all the buttons and they're doing nothing except for jumping, so this feels very much based off a Mario Brothers game. But in a funny way, hey, I can't make it up there. The controls don't play as well as I think Mario would. Man. Whether I reach a height is questionable. He seems to jump a random amount. But he does seem like he only platforms. You can jump on things like Mario. You can definitely see his influence, the influence here. But you have a clock time slowing, counting down, so you can't play forever. And this is very much just basic platforming with one enemy type. You have to actually touch the things. I don't really see the reason for this to be in holograms. Why they're doing a Matrix style theme well before the Matrix did it. And then here you have World 2 going underground. So you just know they stole as much as they thought they could get away with from Mario. And like, there's no ledge grab button as far as I can tell. So the weirdness of being able to jump at random times seems to still really be an issue. Let me just tap the A button just to see if there's like a pump up ability or something like that where that possibly lets you jump higher. No. So unless I was supposed to convince an enemy to chase me a very far distance, which it looks like they despawned and they don't respawn, and it doesn't look like the bricks respawn, and you can't grab the ledge of the floor, there is something to this. This does make a symbol when you're next to a wall. When you press the B button. But the controller doesn't do anything. Well, Kid Chameleon does not interest me. Much better off playing Mario. Yeah. If there's about 700 Nintendo games, well, this one might be an adult game. That would be strange, as labeled as a classic. There definitely is a problem in the idea that they're calling all of these classics, and they aren't really classics. They are just what Sega owns the rights to. Some of them are classics, I would argue, but not all of them by any means. Oh no, this looks like it's just a JRPG game. Which, maybe there's an argument towards that they're showing me credits and I can't get around it. Maybe there's an argument to playing an old school JRPG that might have some relevancy if you had nostalgia for it compared to playing a low effort RPG Maker game on Steam. But honestly, I think it more boils down to the idea that you shouldn't probably play either. So, when are we going to be allowed to play? And I guess this one had save files, so it actually saves, whereas a lot of the cheaper games didn't have a battery to back up save files, and instead would just use codes or reset. And here you have a classic sound effect when text is being made on screen. Hand me that little girl. Girl? I know I've seen King Noel's treasures. They'll do anything to make me talk. They'll probably even kill me, who knows, so please help me. Apparently that girl is Friday, as in my girl Friday. And Kayla apparently is the bad guy. So off on an adventure we're going. Haha, you won't get away. We did it, she's gone. Come on. The name's Friday, don't call me girl. Gosh, this is just too slow. Man, I'm not even gonna get to the gameplay at this point. It's just too much text. And that would be the problem with any old school RPG, whether it's a JRPG or not, is that really they just want to tell a story and they don't want you to actually play. Like, interactivity is secondary to what I will admit is very good animation and possibly even good storytelling if I could get into it, but it's just not what I'm looking for. I don't think visual novels ever made it big on the Master System anymore, or the NES. There probably were a few on the Famicom, but even there, I think the size restrictions of the games and the age inappropriate of so many visual novels kind of pushed that out of the possibility. So I thought what I was going to do here is stand on this, and then that would have pushed the statue. But it's not doing anything. That's odd. And there's a whole item system here. So let's see. So it's an isometric adventure platforming game. This doesn't look terrible. But it's certainly a slow burn as far as the setup. Now the livestock. A lot of platforming here, no enemies here. It does make me wonder how often we will run into enemies. Clearly we will at some point, but it seems like to start with they want to start real slow. Or I'd half expect a... Yeah, this definitely feels more like a puzzle game than a adventure game. Which that definitely will affect whether or not you're really interested in it. And I bet there isn't anything hidden behind. Oh. Oops. I'm sailing by just a whole bunch of statues that I wonder if they're going to attack you or not. I wonder if this is sending me back to the very beginning, or if I just found the exit to the entire dungeon. Like, there's kind of nothing you can do here. This is too slow. Well, look at that. You're back into story. And that was Landstalker. Not a terrible game. Just not super interesting. If there was just a picture, an icon of one of the characters on the front of each of these games, it would be so much easier to figure it out. Let's see what Light Crusader is about. This is probably the pinnacle of art that you could have had on a Master System. It's not terrible, but it's not great. And I imagine most of these games were programmed in very short amounts of time and in relatively small groups of maybe 2 or 3 people. It looks like that guy's face has been burnt. But there's nothing here that's gonna skip any of this. So you literally just have to watch the credits, which the credits at the front of video games are something that movies still occasionally get away with doing, but video games have pretty much completely abandoned. And I think that is fair. At the end of the day, unlike many other forms of art, video games are first and foremost supposed to be something sellable and entertaining in some way to the player. Putting your ego in front of that and forcing people to watch credits for the names of people that you very possibly will never see make another game is not helping the player in any way. Honestly, the only names in the video game world have just lived long enough that they pretty much have spoiled their own names. Shigeru Miyamoto might be the only name that you would want to see in front of a new game and be happy to see, but if this is a different isometric platforming game, obviously. with save spots. And it looks like you're gonna have to talk to a bunch of people before you can make any progress. Like, or you're gonna find potions and other things. But yeah, if you had the creator of the Fable series name in front of a game these days, that doesn't really hold a lot of weight. If you have Cliff Bleszinski mentioned, oops. That's interesting that he's just a movable piece of furniture. Wonder if that resets. Yes, it does. Yeah. Yeah, Cliff Bleszinski wouldn't be a good name. I can't even think of anybody else who's really become super popular around the, as far as the people who did build enough of a name. Like the creator of the puzzle game The Witness made the game Braid before that, and his name is Jonathan Blow, and his name doesn't really mean so much to me because while he's good at making like puzzle games, he's terrible at writing stories. So I would have to see who the writer was working with him, and I would say, well, if he's writing the story himself and it is a heavily story-based game, then you're setting yourself up for frustration. Let's see, there's Phil Fish, who's not in the video game development world anymore. That's also a very common thing where you straight up have people that they just get mad at either the video game community in general or the video game community gets mad at them, and I think in Phil Fish it was a little bit of both. Can't break these. Man, you're just gonna have to run around all over the place. There's gotta be a way to leave this city, I bet. That would be my guess, is we leave the city and then we start attacking things and having actual gameplay. I found a cemetery, but no ghosts. Well, I like the animation style here of the characters. I don't think I like this particular one guy, but with his long blonde hair and armor. There's not anything terribly wrong with it, it's just not terribly great. But yeah. Let's look at the map. How does one access the map? You come over here, and yeah, seems like it's a relatively small area, and until you can get out of the castle, you're stuck. Found a decent amount of stuff. Mode does not seem to change anything. Damage number, window on, item all use on. Interesting. Well, if that wasn't so incredibly slow, there might be a game there of relevance. And speaking of incredibly slow, I'm taking forever to go through each of these games, to the point where there may be a third point here. I don't know what really the Phantasy Star series is about, but it seems like it's clearly a game series that gained enough popularity, at least in Japan, to then continue to go on to have Phantasy Star Online be created, and people seem to really like to play that. Right. I'm hitting the wrong buttons. Notice there you use the word rub instead of back or delete, which backspace would be the right word, not delete. Giant Demon. I thought Phantasy Star Online was kind of more of a well, it sounds like it's a sci-fi game, but I guess it does have fantasy in the name too. I thought it was kind of more of a Second Life type game where you really didn't do much of anything as far as gameplay, but apparently there is actual gameplay in it, and it is kind of more of a mecha game than I thought it would be. But my understanding of Phantasy Star as a series clearly is almost 100% from ignorance. Yeah. And here you have a very 90s anime guy, mecha guy, and then a 90s anime elf girl with ears that are super long and not really attached to her head. And even at low resolution, they're using very low resolution art. Right, this is the first point where they've actually let me control things. So we've got two people, and we bought some weapons. We don't have enough weapons there. The controls here are terrible. It is basically D-pad, then let off the D-pad to control. So I'm guessing this is probably an RPG game with... We haven't actually seen any map worlds, open worlds with instant battles up until this point. So yeah, I guess this is probably a fight or strategy are the only two options. Order or run. Order this guy to do magic on Mosquito, or order this girl to do this item. Well, I think I've seen more than enough as far as Phantasy Star 1 or Phantasy Star 2. I don't need to see any more to say. You would have to be a fairly hardcore fan of Phantasy Star to want to play Phantasy Star 2. But I will put it in the favorite section because it does at least have some relevancy to Phantasy Star fans. And of course we may get into a whole system here where now each one of these Phantasy Star games decides to just have incredibly long load times or setup times. Even by the time they're at Phantasy Star 3, they're just calling it PS3. And I'm playing this in 2020, so and this was copyright 91, so you're talking 29-year-old game potentially here, if not possibly a little bit more. Oh, and the start button in this one just pauses things instead of speeding up the scrolling. None of the other buttons seem to do anything. So yeah, slow intros, but in all fairness, if you had bought a new Master System and you bought a new game for your Master System, you're at that point probably somewhere around $400 to $500 invested. So you definitely want, or what modern day $400 to $500 equivalent would have been, you would have wanted to get as much entertainment as possible out of it. This definitely looks like a different kind of world and game. Apparently there's a search button that you can press at any time to interact with things. That kind of jumped you into the game faster, but you're now in kind of a more medieval place instead of what looked like a sci-fi place. And see, I just don't have a clue as far as, like, it's the same character even, and now he's going by the name Rise, H-R-H-Y-S. Feel like I'm probably going up towards a castle, as is typical in these kinds of games. And you don't even go inside buildings now, you just keep it all on the same screen. Which I can't say I absolutely hate that idea, because that saves you one probably long load. Games not typically known for having loads in this generation. Well, I got some music to play. So apparently I'm gonna marry this guy. Wow, that scrolling speed is all over the place. I wasn't even pressing a button. I'm not controlling this. So in the next game, you're set up for a marriage. To Maya. And then she gets kidnapped. Very basic story. And that is a problem, certainly, you're gonna run into, is that all the stories in old games are going to be very badly written, even by video game standards. And this is just scrolling way too fast, so I don't know if this is a glitch or what, because I'm not like hitting any buttons on the controller. It's like auto-scrolling itself, but then it sometimes decides to just jump forward. But once again, you're in a scenario here where I guess you got thrown in jail. So, just like a really slow game. It seems like it's telling a story. Phantasy Star 3 Generations of Doom. But not something I think I could really play. Then you have Phantasy Star 4. Again, I suspect these games may have been made by different teams in very short amounts of time. The idea that the Master System would even have 3 games in a series is rather questionable. But I think, if I recall correctly, and I could be very wrong about that, I think there was still a lot of games being released for the Master System after the 32X adapter became available. So it wasn't like Sega just told people they had to immediately support 32X and develop games that look like they should be for the 32X. And it, I think, was even a rather long time before they eventually integrated the 32X into the Master System itself. I'm fairly certain they did that at some point, because the 32X as an adapter was kind of weird. And then here again, the next Phantasy Star game looks like it's animated by a completely different team. Seems like there's no thematic consistency. The interface looks totally different. We've got different characters now, which I guess maybe they're a generation ahead. It still feels like it's a very fantasy based world with space people in space outfits. Either that, or they just have a unique art style in which they wanted to depict people in armor. This seems like this is going to speed up the start position quite a bit. So I guess he's supposed to be in red armor, but from a top-down perspective, he looks more like he's in a spacesuit. Right. Is there any way to make this text go faster, though? Or are we still stuck in the exact same position? I think there probably is an argument to be made that, wow, you get to walk around and then you're immediately tagged with another character. I feel like there probably is a just inherent difference between Japanese fans of games and what they like and what they've grown up with, compared to Western game players, in the sense that I think Japanese people inherently get down to the idea, and I think this is probably a Buddhist concept, of spending 10,000 hours to become an expert in something, and just putting a lot of work and overworking themselves and working themselves potentially to death. This looks like the exact same game. It looks like it's the same concept as Phantasy Star 2. And while we are moving the things forward, we almost have a full shelf now of actually games worth looking at. LMMP. Yeah, which would make Rydo the next one. If this is the game I think it is, it's the one where you play as a star character. But I could be totally wrong about that. Yeah. I think there is just inherently a difference amongst Japanese players, and that's why they like these long-running visual novels, the long-running JRPGs, the idea of getting obsessed with something and then playing it a lot. Although, in a weird way, they also are very fad-based, so it seems like they move on to the next big thing after they've been obsessed with the last big thing. So there's really not a lot of consistency there. I doubt there's too many Final Fantasy fans in Japan that are going back to play Final Fantasy 1 or 2 or 3 or however that series is named in Japan and numbered in Japan, because the numbering system is different. So this is the game where he plays the star character. And this definitely looks heavily influenced by Sonic. Let's see. He has a little attack. He can jump with both buttons. He can, I believe, lift himself up. So you have to hold the climb button to climb up. So he's kind of like the opposite of Sonic in the sense that he is slow and cautious while basically doing the same thing as Sonic. But yeah, and I could see an idea here, because there's been a very good argument made that Sonic is not actually a good game in general, because it is bad at telegraphing whether or not you're going to hit an enemy, and it only gives you a small frame window, or often no frame window at all, to see if there is going to be something that attacks you. So the general concept of Sonic and being able to run and gain as much speed as possible gets interrupted by the fact that they have the enemies in the way. And if Sonic was a more modern game, perhaps they would have him they would have him give a pacifist mode or something along that side, where he doesn't have any enemies that he really needs to fight. But yeah, on the face of it, this doesn't look good. It doesn't feel good. It has a little flinging ability, but it is super slow. And it is definitely more around the just general idea of, I think, getting where you're supposed to go. I don't know if there's actually something I'm supposed to be doing here or what. See, I don't see how I'm supposed to. I don't see what I just did there to defeat that guy, but apparently I did. You gotta be facing the right direction. Alright, well, that's Rystar. There's nothing there worth talking about. I would say the Master System also has kind of some extra problems with its design. It has a power switch, it has a reset button, it has two plug-in connectors for 2 controllers. I think it does. Instead of, I know there was one console out there that they literally had like 1 connector for 1 controller, and you had to plug in the second controller into the back of the first controller or something like that. The Master System kind of had a flap to keep things out, keep dust out. It just had a lot of movable parts, and here we're playing as somebody that, wow, 1 hit? That's crazy. So you're throwing these little shinobi things. Yeah, it's like 1 hit or 2 hits and you're dead. Well, that sucks. There are ninja games, certainly, and they're definitely a collection of ninja games. It feels like you might be getting randomized enemies here, but you can't jump up and hit things. You can't jump up that way. And they're gonna start throwing well, I'm not sure what it takes to get up and over there, but it seems to be it really doesn't want me to do that. And you have like burning buildings in the background. It took a lot of work. And it spawned some new enemies. And apparently the dog has now been reduced to a puppy. And then you have like 1 hit. Alright, well, Shadow Dancer, no good. Let's see the next game. It does have 2 controllers, but then it also has a headset plug and a volume fader on the front, which that would have been wiser to have that on the controllers, and eventually that got integrated into the controllers. Well, I'm hitting start and it won't let me do anything with the start button. And here they're saying delete, but delete's the wrong word. Should be backspace. But even at that time, people didn't know the difference between delete and backspace. The cursor, the place where you're going to put the next letter, indicates whether backspace or delete is useful. If you move your cursor to the left and you're underlined the letter A that you've already typed, and then you hit delete, you'll delete A. If you hit backspace, you'll delete the thing to the left of the A. In the case of these games, you would be hitting backspace to delete the thing to the left of where the cursor is. I'm not paying any attention to the story. This is pretty poor animation, but I'm not going to be super critical of the visuals of nearly 30-year-old games. Like, for the time, this was probably perfectly fine. In fact, that 3D zooming animation is quite good. Seems like I just... Interesting. I thought I had clicked the wrong thing, but apparently not. But I'm not sure what kind of gameplay is actually here. This may just be an interactive story. And it's interesting that they're highlighting with a title over the character that's speaking. That's a very bad way to do this. They should just put Minister at the top left of the black box at the bottom so that you know the Minister is speaking and can keep your eyes generally in the text area to read. And then you can look up to look at the characters if you need a slight visual break. Yeah, I don't know if I'd say the Master System was actually built cheaply by any means. I just think it may be, frankly, have been built too expensively. I would say the NES is probably built fairly cheaply as a device, and yet that's what got it its player base more than anything, I imagine, is that it was a fairly cheap system and toy. Timing would have been particularly specific to releasing the first consoles, because had you released it a decade earlier, I imagine you would have had 10,000 less people with TVs at all, or TVs that were so expensive that they wouldn't dare plug in a device into it. Man, there's just a ton of text. Oh, you know what? I'm doing this. Am I? I'm the one causing the text to appear. I was just hitting the same button over and over again. So this is just a rotating image of a shop. And so I guess that's the labyrinth. And so this is just a straight up dungeon crawler. Interesting. Well, I have no interest in playing a dungeon crawler. If I ever was going to play a dungeon crawler, I would probably play a terrible anime dungeon crawler with anime waifus in it and scantily clad women, because that's about all they make these days in the dungeon crawler format, and it's still not really worth it at that point to play him. I think we're gonna have to break this up into a third experience unless we can get a, like, the odds are very low that we're gonna get a run of games that are just quick and to the point. More and more as we get down this alphabetical list, we're running into things that are putting a lot of text and stuff in front of you. You can definitely tell that these games were not designed to be demo friendly. They maybe have track screens, and maybe it would have been more logical for me to simply leave all these games on their start screens until they played in the track screen to show me what the gameplay actually looked like. But I imagine a lot of these games wouldn't have a track screens, and there's no easy way to tell. You're getting a lot of fantasy, but you also are getting kind of a different kind of fantasy compared to Gauntlet. Gauntlet is very much a barbarian Dungeons and Dragons. I would say Hero Quest-esque fantasy, whereas everything else is more of the beginnings of what is a very solidified now JRPG fantasy with elves and dragons and things, and everything is just drawn cute and it's all a little over the top. And I like this animation. This looks better than the previous game. but it's all the same. At least in this case, I can make the story speed up by holding down the button. So, like, this is something you would expect any game nowadays to be able to do. Let's see. So, let's see if we can play this with the analog stick. Just more text. Let me buy. Just more. Let me buy so I can actually. Then I had to fade out to reset the instance. So we have another JRPG type game. And it was quite the long journey, I would say, to get from this to something like Dragon Quest, which is the most popular JRPG, or to get from this to something like Monster Hunter, which is a very popular JRPG, monster hunting specialized game. And I imagine it's always the same. You go talk to the king. Just a ton of text. Just a ton of text. Agree. Return to town and gather your troops. So it seems like we've got a whole team that's going with us. You can see the elf ears. Just traditionally at this point are super long, where it's fairly more common to have elf ears be pointy still, but not so long that they are above the top of the heads of a lot of characters. And there's a lot of old school animations and ways of drawing characters here that are 90s-esque and would not be the way things are drawn now. Now, everything very much is inspired by the moe anime style, which is just drawing characters completely anatomically incorrect and short and cute, and the heavy emphasis on focusing on female and feminine beauty. Well, this kind of feels like a Zelda game almost, without actually figuring out what to do. I don't think I'll be able to actually get into a fight here, but I think we can fairly guess that this is going to be a turn-based JRPG game, considering we have a whole team that just joined us, so there really wouldn't be a way that a Master System game could handle that. There is an action RPG game that recently got see, now he wants you to purchase things. Yeah, action RPG games wouldn't exist at this time and wouldn't really help that much. They've finally let me go somewhere. So here we are fighting goblins. I don't mind fighting goblins if they look like goblins. That's just probably important to know the origins of where a lot of these cryptozoology stuff comes from. Oh, this is a actual character placement game. So there are quite a few of these out there where you straight up do that, but then it drops into a, I guess, automated fight, and the graphics are actually very nice there, and it seems to probably evolve this in such a way that it selects the characters in the right order. But he didn't actually defeat it didn't defeat that one monster, so color me a little confused. So it must have just done damage to him. And so you get some experience and some gold and coins. Well, we know how this game is gonna go. Not terrible. I could see potentially wanting to play Shining Force again. Let's see, that's not what I meant to hit. So let's put Shining Force in our favorite spot, and that would leave us with Shining Force 2, Shinobi, Sonic the Hedgehog games, and then Streets of Rage games. And we already looked at the Monster Boy, Wonder Boy games. Vector Man. Man, there is kind of a heavy listing here of the good games potentially being after the word Sonic, as far as everything that's listed here. And let's just make it count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So there's 24 on the shelf, which means in total there's less than 60, I would say. Yeah, that would probably be maybe slightly over 60. Maybe less than 70 games of the 570 games available for the Master System. And these are supposed to be the classics. And honestly, I can't even get 24 in here. I'm being fairly liberal on some of these games as far as being even slightly relevant or worth playing. And I still will end up putting probably just Shining Force 2, probably not the Shinobi games, probably all the Sonic games, probably the Streets of Rage games, and Vector Man and JoJam and Earl games, maybe Virtual Fighter too. So there might be a point here where I get the list long enough to do one top shelf of games, but there's a decent chance that we won't even reach that point. In all fairness, if I was trying to do the same thing with NES games, I'd probably have similar responses for 70, at least 70 Nintendo games or officially licensed Nintendo games. But if you were to have me do 70 of the classic NES games, I would definitely have a lot more to say and would want to spend a lot more time playing it. Because if I actually was going to sit down and commit to playing Punch-Out, I could easily play Punch-Out for an hour at any point probably in my life. I could easily play Super Mario Bros. 1, 2, and 3 for an hour each. I could easily at least have something to say and highlight something about almost all the first party Nintendo games on top of many of the third party Nintendo games. In all fairness, I will say that these Master System games do seem to not tend to have terrible graphics. So there does seem to be a focus on making sure the games look good, and they often sound good, but they often just play terrible. Anyways, that's going to be at the end of this spotlight. We're going to have another one. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.